I opened the worn Bible my son had left on the edge of my desk, and a folded note slipped out, landing face down on the wood. I thought it was just a forgotten bookmark, something harmless. But when I picked it up and read the words, my knees almost gave way beneath me. If she refuses to sign over the $5 million mansion, throw her out. My own breath caught in my throat. The letters blurred as tears filled my eyes. My son's Bible, and this note, a message about me. Days later, he would slam the mansion papers on my table and demand the keys to my home. But in that moment, staring at the words, I felt the floor of my life begin to crack open. My name is Clara Whitmore. I am 78 years old, a widow, and for most of my life, I believed my family was my safe haven. I believed that the home I built with my late husband in Charleston was more than just brick and stone. It was our life's work, a sanctuary, the heart of who I am. But the truth that fell out of that Bible nearly destroyed me. Remember to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below if you want to hear more grandma life stories filled with emotion, betrayal, and unexpected strength. I sat there, the note trembling between my fingers, and a storm of memories rushed back to me. My son, Victor, was once a boy who clung to my skirts, who begged me to read him stories at night. He was my only child, the center of my world. I never thought I would see his name tied to something so cruel. My daughter-in-law, Miranda, always smiling politely, calling me Mom with syrup in her voice, had her fingerprints on this betrayal too. And Emily, my sweet granddaughter, only 17, how could she survive caught between parents who schemed and a grandmother who had just discovered her world was under attack? I pressed the note to the desk as though it might vanish if I let it flutter away. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. My hand shook against the wood grain. This wasn't just a careless threat written in anger. It was planned. It was deliberate. It was tucked into a Bible, the very book that should have symbolized truth, faith, and love. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt too quiet, the shadows too heavy. Every creak in the walls sounded like footsteps. I kept hearing Victor's voice in my mind, the confident tone he always used when he spoke to me as if I were a child, not his mother. I could imagine him saying the words written on the note, "Sign it or be thrown out." My stomach twisted at the thought. I remembered Miranda's watchful eyes during dinner the week before, the way she glanced at Victor when I refused wine. She had leaned over and said softly, "This house is too big for just one person, Mom." I thought it was just a comment. Now it echoed like a warning. I folded the note carefully and slid it back into the Bible, as if hiding it there might somehow rewind time, undo what I had seen. But the truth couldn't be erased. I walked through the mansion's halls, brushing my fingers along the polished wood banister, the family portraits, the shelves of books my husband loved. Would all this be taken from me? Would my son, my own flesh and blood, truly force me out of the very home I had built with my hands, with my grief, with my love? Outside, the Charleston night wrapped the house in stillness, but inside my chest, there was only chaos. I thought of Emily, the granddaughter who often brought me tea, who listened to my stories about the past. She was gentle, but sharper than she appeared. She noticed things. She had once whispered to me after dinner, "Grandma, don't let them make you do anything you don't want to do." At the time, I had brushed it aside, thinking she was just tired of her parents' arguments. Now I wondered if she already knew something. I sat at my writing desk and pulled out my journal. My hand hovered over the page, the pen poised, but the words would not come. All I could think was how quickly love can rot when greed takes root. My late husband, God rest his soul, had trusted Victor to be the man of the family when he was gone. He had left me the mansion, yes, but he always said it would one day be Victor's, to inherit with honor. Never did he imagine his son would try to steal it with lies and intimidation while I was still alive. I lit a small lamp, its glow spilling across the pages of my journal, and forced myself to breathe slowly. 1, 2, 3. I had to think clearly. My mind whispered questions. Should I confront him? Should I stay silent and watch? Should I gather proof? My heart screamed only one thing. Why, Victor? Why would you do this to me? I leaned back in my chair and looked around the study. On the mantel above the fireplace rested the photograph of Victor as a young boy, beaming with his first baseball glove. I reached up and touched the frame, my chest tight with grief. The boy I loved seemed gone, replaced by a man who saw me as nothing but an obstacle. My fingers tightened around the Bible. I could not let them take this house from me. I could not let them reduce my life to a suitcase in the corner of some nursing home. But what could I do? I was 78, a widow, a mother betrayed. Yet as I sat there, the note heavy as stone in my palm, something stirred deep inside me. A voice I thought I had lost long ago whispered, "Clara, you have faced worse storms. You will not go quietly." The clock ticked past midnight. I stared out the window, the streetlights glowing faintly against the darkness. Tomorrow everything would look the same from the outside. The roses in the garden would bloom, the neighbors would wave. But inside this house, the walls now held a secret that could shatter us all. And I knew, as surely as I knew my own name, that this note was not the end. It was only the beginning of a battle I never imagined I would fight against my own son. The morning light streamed through the tall windows of my bedroom, painting the room in soft gold. It should have been peaceful, but peace had left me the moment that note fell out of Victor's Bible. I held it in my thoughts like a shard of glass lodged deep inside my chest. Every step I took through the mansion seemed heavier. Every memory tied to these walls now carried a shadow. I stood by the vanity, brushing my thinning gray hair, and the reflection staring back at me looked older than it had yesterday. My eyes were tired, but sharp. My late husband used to call me resilient. He said that after his passing, I would carry both his strength and mine. I had done that. Through years of widowhood, through raising Victor, through building the business that gave us this house. But resilience feels different when the person you must withstand is your own child. I remember the early years with Victor as clearly as the morning sun. He was my miracle baby, the boy who laughed at everything, who insisted on climbing trees and coming home with scraped knees. I gave him everything. When my husband died unexpectedly, I threw myself into work. I opened a small seamstress shop downtown, and stitch by stitch, I built a name. People came for my designs, but they stayed because they knew I would not quit until perfection was in their hands. That little shop became the cornerstone of something greater, and slowly, I bought this mansion brick by brick, payment by payment. I wanted Victor to grow up with stability. I wanted him to know that his father's sacrifice was not in vain. But love without boundaries can turn into indulgence. I see that now. Victor was spoiled, though I never admitted it out loud. I wanted to soften the pain of his father's absence. I gave him what he asked for, smoothed over his mistakes, and told myself he would grow into his responsibilities. He did grow, but into a man who believed the world was his to command. A lawyer, sharp-tongued, persuasive. Too persuasive. Miranda entered our lives with a smile too sweet, her hands folded neatly in her lap and words dipped in honey. She would compliment my cooking, admire the roses in the garden, offer to help clear the table. Yet behind her eyes, I always sensed calculation. She had a way of pausing before she spoke, as though she weighed the benefit of every sentence. Once, while pouring me tea, she leaned in and whispered, "This house is so big for just one person, Mom. Don't you ever feel lonely here?" She smiled afterward, but the words clung to me like smoke. I should have paid more attention then. And Emily, my granddaughter, my light. At 17, she has more heart than many adults I know. She spends her weekends in my study, sketching quietly while I write in my journal. She listens when I speak about the old days, about Charleston in the 60s, about how women had to fight for the smallest sliver of independence. She is gentle, but not blind. She notices the tension. Sometimes, after dinner, she squeezes my hand under the table, her eyes saying more than words ever could. It was Emily who confirmed my fears not long after I found the note. She tiptoed into my room late one evening, her hair loose from its braid, her face pale with worry. She whispered, "Grandma, I overheard them. Dad and Mom.
They said they'll find a way to make you sign. They think you're too old to fight." Her voice cracked on the last words. I held her trembling hand and felt the weight of her fear. In that moment, I knew this wasn't just my battle. It was hers too. I replayed Miranda's smirks, Victor's sudden bursts of impatience, the way he slammed his briefcase on the dining room table last week. "Mother," he had said, "it's time to be realistic. This mansion is more than you can handle. Let me take care of it." I smiled faintly, excusing myself to the kitchen, pretending not to hear the undertone in his voice. I had convinced myself he was just being practical. But now, after the note, after Emily's warning, I realized it was all part of a larger design. That night, I walked through the halls of the mansion with the lights dimmed, touching the walls, as though I needed to remind myself that this was real, that it was mine. I paused at the doorway to Victor's old bedroom, still lined with baseball trophies and faded posters. My throat tightened. How could the same boy who once begged me to sew his uniform patch back on now plan to strip me of everything? I returned to my study and sat before the Bible once more. The note remained hidden inside, but I could feel its weight even when I wasn't touching it. My hands curled into fists. I wanted to march into Victor's house that very night, slam the paper on the table, and demand an explanation. But something inside me, something steady and cold, told me not to. I couldn't act rashly. If I showed my hand too soon, they would bury their intentions deeper. So I made a decision. I would wait. I would watch. I would gather proof. Emily would help me. I could see it in her determined eyes. She wasn't just a child caught in the middle. She was a witness. And in her loyalty, I felt a strength I thought I had lost. But still, I couldn't quiet the ache in my chest. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering when exactly the bond between mother and son had shifted into something unrecognizable. Was it the day I bought the mansion? Was it the day Victor realized how much it was worth? Or had greed been growing quietly inside him all along, waiting for its moment to bloom? Whatever the answer, I knew one thing as dawn crept through the curtains. I could not ignore the signs anymore. I could not dismiss the cold glance in Miranda's eyes, the sharp edge in Victor's words, the warning whispered by Emily. My life was no longer safe. My sanctuary was under siege, and if I wanted to survive, I would need to be sharper than I had ever been before. The days that followed stretched like a thin wire ready to snap. I tried to carry on as though nothing had changed, as though I hadn't found that cursed note, as though my granddaughter hadn't whispered the truth in my ear. But no matter how carefully I smoothed my face into calmness, I could feel the storm building. Victor began to visit more often, not with warmth, not with laughter, but with a certain heaviness that clung to the air. He no longer came to share dinner or sit by the fire. He arrived with papers, always with papers. One afternoon, I watched him walk through the front door carrying his leather case. His stride was brisk, his expression tight. He barely kissed my cheek before heading to the study. When I followed, I saw it. The case lay open on the desk, and inside was a folder labeled Property Transfer. My heart stopped. The words seemed to glow under the lamplight. He noticed my gaze and quickly shut the folder, his lips pressing into a thin line. "Mother," he said, his voice clipped, "we'll talk about this later. Not now." I nodded, feigning ignorance, though inside my pulse raced. Every instinct told me to snatch the folder, to rip it open and see for myself. But I forced my trembling hands to rest calmly against my skirt. If I showed him fear, he would know. If I showed him anger, he would prepare his defenses. That evening, Miranda came with him. She floated into the kitchen, her perfume trailing behind her like smoke, and offered to make me tea. Her voice was sweet, but her hands trembled slightly as she set the cup down in front of me. I lifted it, and the faint bitterness hit my nose before I even took a sip. Something was off. I placed it back on the saucer untouched. "Not thirsty?" she asked, her smile frozen. "Not tonight," I replied quietly, watching her eyes flicker toward Victor. Later, I poured the tea into the sink, and as it swirled away, I couldn't help but wonder if she had slipped something into it.
A sedative, perhaps. The thought made my stomach twist. I could not prove it, but the suspicion alone was enough to chill my blood. I began to keep small notes in my journal. Times Victor arrived, the papers he carried, Miranda's behavior. I felt like a detective in my own house, gathering evidence against the people who were supposed to love me. The first open confrontation came sooner than I expected. Victor stayed behind after Miranda excused herself, leaving us in the study with only the fire crackling in the hearth. He placed the folder on the desk, leaned forward, and fixed me with a look that was equal parts frustration and entitlement. "Mother," he began, his voice rising, "why are you holding on to this house like a miser clutching coins? You're 78 years old. You can't possibly maintain a place like this forever." My fingers gripped the arm of the chair until my knuckles whitened. "This house is my life's work, Victor," I said, my voice low but steady. "Your father and I built it with everything we had." He slammed his hand on the desk, startling me. "And now it should be my turn to protect it, to use it, to restore our family's standing. Don't you see? I can make something of it. You can't." His words cut through me. For a moment, I saw not a son, but a stranger. His face, so like his father's once was, now twisted with ambition. I rose slowly, my hands still trembling, but my voice held firm. "You speak of protecting, but all I hear is taking. You want the mansion, not for family, but for yourself. To cover your debts, to polish your image. Don't deny it." He narrowed his eyes, lips curling into a sneer. "You think you know everything, Mother, but you don't. Stop standing in the way. Sign the papers and let me do what's best." The room seemed to shrink around us. The air grew heavy, charged with years of unspoken tension. I stared at him, and for the first time, I saw no trace of the boy I had raised. Only the man greed had shaped him into. I forced myself to sit back down, my body weak, but my resolve solidifying like stone. I would not sign. Not today, not ever. But I said nothing more. Silence can be sharper than any blade, and I let it hang between us until he stormed out, muttering under his breath. After he left, Emily crept into the study. She had been listening from the hall. Her wide eyes reflected both fear and determination. She reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. "Grandma," she whispered, "don't let him bully you. I'll help you. We'll figure something out." I looked at her, at the strength flickering in her young face, and I felt a surge of hope. Maybe I wasn't alone after all. That night, I sat by the window long after the house fell silent, the stars blurred by the tears in my eyes. My son had crossed a line, and there would be no going back. The battle had begun, and deep in my heart, I knew this was only the first strike. I woke the next morning with my decision weighing heavy in my chest. If Victor was truly willing to force me into signing away everything I had built, then I could no longer wait passively. I had to prepare myself, even if every bone in my body longed for peace instead of war. I remembered a name I hadn't spoken in years: Harold Kent. He had been a close friend of my husband, a lawyer who once guided us through difficult business decisions. After my husband passed, Harold had attended the funeral, shaken my hand with genuine sorrow, and told me to call if I ever needed help. I never did, until now. I found his number tucked in an old address book. My fingers trembled as I dialed, my heart thundering in my chest. When his voice answered, deep and steady, I nearly broke into tears. "Harold," I whispered, "it's Clara Whitmore. I think I need your help." We met that afternoon in his small, oak-paneled office. He looked older, hair silvered, but his eyes were as sharp as I remembered. After I explained everything, the note in the Bible, the suspicious tea, the folder labeled property transfer, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "Clara," he said, voice low, "listen to me carefully. Do not sign anything. No matter what they say, no matter how they pressure you, hold firm. And keep every scrap of evidence you can find. That note is a start, but it won't be enough on its own." I clutched my purse tighter, nodding. "Harold, he's my son. I don't want this to end in ruin." "Your son made his choice when he plotted against you," Harold replied firmly. "You need to protect yourself now." When I returned home, Emily was waiting on the porch. She looked anxious, chewing her lip, but her face softened when she saw me. "Grandma, did you find someone to help?" "Yes," I said quietly, taking her hand. "An old friend. We're not alone in this." Her shoulders eased with relief, and for the first time in days, I saw her smile. She was braver than I ever realized. That evening, while putting away laundry in the guest bedroom, I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. A folder lay half hidden under a blanket at the foot of the bed. I pulled it out and opened it carefully. Inside was a document already filled out with my name, my supposed signature scrawled across the bottom. It was a deed, transferring the mansion to Victor. My vision blurred, and I gripped the dresser for balance. They had forged my signature. My hand shook as I traced the ink. The letters looked like mine, but stiff, unnatural. If this paper ever reached the wrong hands, it could strip me of everything in an instant. Emily came in just as I was folding the deed back into the folder. She froze when she saw my face. "What is it?" I showed her the paper, my voice breaking. "They've already signed me away, Emily, without me even touching a pen." Her jaw tightened, her young face hardening with resolve. "Then we'll prove it's fake. You can't give up, Grandma. They're counting on you being too scared to fight back." I hugged her tightly, pressing my cheek against her hair. Her words steadied me. I wasn't helpless, not with her by my side. Later that night, as I sat in the study with the forged deed spread before me, Victor arrived again. He walked in without knocking, his expression sharp. Miranda trailed behind him, her smile thin and rehearsed. "Mother," Victor began, dropping his case on the desk, "we need to move forward. The family name is at stake. Do you want people whispering that the Whitmores are drowning in debts and clinging to a crumbling mansion? I can fix this. I can fix all of it." I stared at him, willing my face to remain calm, even as my heart screamed. "And what exactly must I do for you to fix it?" He opened the case and slid papers across the desk. "Sign these. Transfer the mansion to me. I'll take care of everything from there. You'll live comfortably, I promise." Comfortably. The word felt like poison on his tongue. He wanted me silenced, contained, and stripped of my dignity. I folded my hands, forcing a weak smile. "Victor, your father always said you were ambitious. I suppose he was right." He frowned, suspicious at my tone, but Miranda interjected smoothly. "Mom, you've carried this house on your back long enough. Let us take the weight from you. Isn't it time you rested?" I looked at her, then at Victor, and finally down at the forged signature in my lap, hidden beneath the table. "Rest," they said. "Rest while they erased me." Inside, I made a vow. I would not rest, not until this house, my legacy, my life, was safe from their hands. When they left, Emily rushed in from the hallway where she had been listening. Her eyes burned with anger. "They'll stop at nothing, Grandma. We have to be smarter. We have to be ready." I nodded, gripping her hand tightly. "We will be. I promise you, Emily. We will be." "It's mine." And as the door closed behind them that night, I realized the fight was no longer just about keeping the mansion. It was about keeping the very truth of who I was. The morning after Victor's latest visit, the mansion felt colder, as though his presence had seeped into the walls and left behind a residue of dread. I moved slowly through the rooms, straightening cushions, watering plants, pretending life was still normal. But in my chest, the heaviness of betrayal pressed harder with every breath. I could no longer mistake my son's intentions. He wasn't asking anymore, he was demanding. I sat at the dining table, the sunlight spilling across the polished surface, and thought about the forged deed hidden in my drawer. My name, signed in ink that wasn't mine. It haunted me. I pictured Victor in some office, waving it proudly, claiming victory. I could almost hear his voice declaring, "It's done. The house is mine." The thought made my skin prickle. Later that day, Victor returned. This time he didn't bother with pleasantries. He walked into the study, his steps sharp, and placed the papers directly in front of me. His eyes were hard, his jaw clenched. "Mother," he said, "it's time to stop playing games. You know as well as I do that this house will only drag you down. Sign the papers. Today." I looked up at him, forcing my voice to remain calm, even as my heart raced. "Do you truly believe forcing me will make you a better man, Victor? Or is it just about erasing your debts?" For a second, his face twitched, a crack in his armor. Then he slammed his fist on the table, making the teacups rattle. "Enough. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. If you don't sign, everything collapses. Don't you care about your own family's reputation?" The words cut deep, but not as deep as the realization that he didn't see me as family anymore. I was only an obstacle. Miranda appeared in the doorway, arms folded, her expression carefully composed. "Mom," she said softly, almost pleading, "we're not trying to hurt you. We just want to take the burden away. This house, it's too much for you. Let us handle it." Her tone might have swayed another woman, but I saw the calculation behind her eyes. She wasn't worried about my burden. She was worried about her share of what Victor could gain. I pressed my hands flat on the table, leaning forward. "I carried this house through grief and hardship. Don't speak to me about burdens, Miranda. You have no idea what I've borne." Victor stepped closer, lowering his voice into a hiss. "If you refuse, you'll regret it. Don't test me, Mother." A chill ran down my spine, but I forced myself to stay seated, my body still, my voice steady. "Do what you think you must, Victor. I will not be bullied in my own home." He stared at me for a long moment, anger simmering in his eyes, then gathered the papers and stormed out. Miranda followed, but not before giving me a tight smile that felt more like a threat than kindness. When the door slammed shut, I let out the breath I had been holding. My hands shook uncontrollably. My own son had stood over me like an adversary, not a child. The weight of it pressed into my bones, but I knew I couldn't collapse. Not yet. Emily found me moments later, her eyes wide with worry. "Grandma, I heard everything. He's not going to stop." I reached for her hand, clutching it tightly. "I know, darling, but we can't let him win." She bit her lip, thinking, then whispered, "Maybe you should pretend to give in. Make them think you're weak. If they believe you're surrendering, they'll slip up. You'll see their true plans." Her words sank deep. Pretend weakness. It was a strategy I hadn't considered, but she was right. I couldn't confront Victor with pure resistance. He was a lawyer, practiced in manipulation, and he had Miranda to back him. But if I let him think I was faltering, he might reveal his hand. That night, I sat alone in the study, the Bible resting on my lap, the note still tucked between its pages. My husband's portrait hung above the mantel, his kind eyes staring back at me. "You always said strength comes in many forms," I whispered. "Maybe mine now is in pretending." The thought both frightened and steadied me. I would let them think they were winning. I would bend just enough for them to lower their guard. And while they celebrated their false victory, I would gather proof, piece by piece, until the truth could no longer be hidden. The next morning, when Victor called, his voice brisk and commanding, I softened mine deliberately. "Yes, Victor, I'll think about signing. Maybe you're right. Maybe the house is too much for me now." There was silence on the line, then a sharp exhale. "Good," he said quickly. "That's the first sensible thing you've said in weeks." I hung up the phone, my heart pounding. My body ached with the weight of deception, but Emily's approving nod gave me courage. As the house settled into its evening silence, I sat in the darkened parlor, hands folded in my lap, listening to the echo of my son's demand replay in my head. He thought I was bending. He thought I was beaten. But he had forgotten who raised him, and he had no idea what I was preparing to do next. The days after I pretended to yield to Victor's demands were heavy with silence, but beneath that silence, I was working. Emily and I moved carefully, speaking little when Victor or Miranda were near, but exchanging glances that carried 1,000 words. I knew I needed more than just suspicion and my granddaughter's loyalty. I needed someone on the outside, someone who could stand beside me when the storm broke. It was then that I thought of Evelyn Ross. Evelyn had been my neighbor when Victor was still in grade school. Our backyards once shared a low fence, and she and I would talk across it for hours while hanging laundry or tending gardens. Time and circumstance had pulled us apart, but I never forgot the strength in her laugh, the sharpness of her mind. She had endured her own battles. Her husband left her when her children were young, forcing her to raise them alone. Life hardened her, but it also made her fierce. I called her one quiet afternoon. My voice trembled at first, but the moment I heard her familiar tone, warm, steady, unmistakably Evelyn, I felt something inside me loosen. "Clara," she said, "it's been too long. What's wrong? I can hear it in your voice." So I told her. Not every detail at first, just enough to open the wound. I spoke of Victor's pressure, Miranda's whispers, the papers laid in front of me. The silence on the other end of the line stretched before Evelyn finally answered. "You're not the first mother to be betrayed by her own blood," she said, "and you won't be the last. But you won't face it alone either. Meet me tomorrow at my house." The next day, Emily drove me there. Evelyn's home was smaller than mine, tucked at the edge of a quiet street, but it radiated warmth. She met me at the door with a hug so tight it nearly cracked my ribs. Her hair was white now, pulled into a neat bun, but her eyes still sparked with fire. Over cups of strong coffee, we sat at her kitchen table while sunlight spilled through lace curtains. I laid out everything: the Bible note, the forged deed, Victor's threats, Miranda's manipulations. Emily sat beside me, her hand in mine, nodding along when I faltered. Evelyn listened in silence, her face grim, her jaw tight. Finally, she spoke. "You've given that boy everything, Clara. And this is how he repays you? I went through the same. Do you remember when my son sold the farmland behind my back? He forged my name on the papers. I thought I would lose everything." I remembered. She had nearly lost her home then, but she fought back, and though it cost her dearly, she survived. "I'll stand by you," Evelyn said firmly. "If you need a witness, if you need someone to testify, I'll be there. Don't you doubt it." Her words wrapped around me like a shield. For the first time since finding the note, I felt the possibility of real strength, the kind that doesn't waver even when blood betrays you. We drifted into memories for a while. Evelyn reminded me of the nights we both worked long hours, me at my sewing machine, her scrubbing floors at a diner, each of us determined to give our children more than we had. We had laughed, cried, and grown up together in those years. And now, decades later, we sat as old women, still fighting battles we never imagined. On the drive home, Emily was quiet, thoughtful. At last she said, "Grandma, you're not alone anymore. Evelyn believes you, and she's not afraid." I nodded, feeling the truth of her words. With Harold's legal wisdom and Evelyn's unwavering loyalty, the pieces of my defense were falling into place. Victor thought he was tightening the noose around me, but in truth, I was building my circle of protection, link by link. That night, as I settled into bed, I let myself drift back to those early years when Evelyn and I were young mothers, when the world expected us to be silent, obedient wives. Society told us then that women's place was in the kitchen, their voices quiet, their needs secondary. But we had both fought in our own ways, me by opening a business when everyone doubted I could, her by raising children alone after her husband vanished. We were not weak then, and we were certainly not weak now. The mansion was still under threat, but I no longer felt like a woman cornered. I felt like a woman preparing. And as I closed my eyes, I clung to Evelyn's words, steady and fierce. "You won't face it alone." The thought carried me into sleep, my heart pounding with something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not just fear, not just sorrow, but resolve. Because if Evelyn could fight her way through betrayal, so could I. And this time, I would not only fight for myself, I would fight for Emily, for the legacy my husband left, for every mother who had ever been told her life's work belonged to someone else. The day I had dreaded finally arrived. It was late afternoon when Victor pulled into the driveway, his expensive car glinting under the Charleston sun. He wasn't alone. Another man stepped out from the passenger side, an attorney, judging by the polished briefcase and stiff suit. My stomach clenched. This wasn't another casual visit. This was an ambush. I sat in the parlor, pretending to read, when Victor strode in with his companion trailing behind. Miranda followed moments later, her smile thin as parchment. "Mother," Victor announced, his tone formal. "This is Mr. Carlyle. He's here to witness the signing. We'll make this quick and easy for you." The signing. My heart thundered in my chest, but I forced my lips to tremble, my hands to shake, as if age and fear had conquered me. I let my shoulders sag, my eyes dart nervously between them. Emily's advice echoed in my mind. Pretend weakness. Let them think you're breaking. Victor placed the papers on the table with a triumphant flourish. "Here it is. The property transfer. Just sign where I've marked, and all your worries will be over." I reached for the pen, my fingers trembling so violently it nearly slipped from my grasp. Inside, my resolve burned like steel, but outside, I let them see only fragility. Miranda leaned closer, her perfume sharp, her voice sickly sweet. "It's for the best, Mom. Think of how much easier life will be once this is behind you." I stared at the papers, my heart hammering. The black ink lines danced before my eyes. My name already sat there in false strokes on the forged deed hidden upstairs. I thought of that Bible, of the note tucked between its pages. If she refuses to sign, throw her out. They had written my fate in advance, but they had not counted on me finding it. I let out a shaky sigh and whispered, "All right, if it will make things easier." Victor's shoulders relaxed, and a flash of triumph crossed his face. "Good. You've finally come to your senses." I lowered the pen toward the paper, but before the tip touched the line, I pulled back. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into my bag and withdrew another document, one Harold had prepared for me. I unfolded it with trembling hands and slid it across the table. "This," I said, my voice steadier now, "is a certified copy of a deed you tried to pass off as mine. But it's a forgery. Do you want to explain that, Victor?" His face drained of color. Miranda stiffened, her smile vanishing. The lawyer blinked, clearly startled, and looked between us in confusion. Victor grabbed the paper, scanning it quickly, his voice rising. "This means nothing. You don't know what you're talking about. You're old, you're confused. Am I?" I cut him off, my voice sharp. "Because I know my own handwriting, Victor, and this is not it. I know you've been planning this for weeks. I found the note. I know you told someone to throw me out if I refused." Silence crashed over the room like a wave. Miranda's eyes widened and she stepped back, her mask slipping. Victor's jaw tightened, his hands balling into fists. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. Not for me, not for our family, but for himself. He realized I wasn't as weak as he believed. I leaned forward, steady now. "You thought you could intimidate me into signing away everything, but you underestimated me, Victor. I built this house with my own 2 hands. I buried my husband here. This isn't just property. This is my life, and you will not take it from me." Emily had been hiding in the hallway, and she stepped into the room at that moment, her small frame trembling, but her chin lifted high. "Dad," she said, her voice clear, "Grandma's right. I heard you and Mom talking about forcing her. I know what you've been planning." Victor's head snapped toward her, rage flashing across his face. "Emily, go to your room!" But she stood her ground, her voice unwavering. "No, you've gone too far. You're not protecting this family. You're destroying it." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsettled by the scene unraveling before him. He gathered his papers and muttered, "Perhaps I should come back another time." He slipped out, leaving the 3 of us in the suffocating silence. Victor rounded on me, his face red with fury. "You think you're clever, don't you? Bringing Harold into this, dragging Emily into your paranoia? This isn't over, Mother. You've made a terrible mistake." I straightened in my chair, my fear evaporating under the heat of his rage. "The only mistake I made was raising a son who values money more than blood." Miranda tugged at his sleeve, her voice sharp. "Victor, let's go." He hesitated, glaring at me one last time, then stormed out with her trailing behind. The slam of the door echoed through the mansion like thunder. Emily rushed to my side, tears brimming in her eyes. "Grandma, you were incredible. You didn't back down." I wrapped my arms around her, holding her close. My heart still pounded, but it wasn't fear this time. It was strength I hadn't felt in years. As I looked around the quiet parlor, I knew the battle was far from over. Victor wouldn't give up so easily. But I had drawn the first real line. I had stood my ground. And for the first time, he knew I was not a woman to be thrown aside. The house grew quieter in the days after Victor's outburst, but the quiet was not peace. It was the kind of silence that waits before a storm breaks. I moved through each room with a wary heart, knowing my son would not retreat forever. Men like Victor did not let go. They pressed harder. Emily stayed close to me, hovering whenever the phone rang or the front gate creaked open. She had heard her father's threats, seen his rage. For all her youth, she understood the danger better than most. Some nights I found her curled in the armchair in my study, refusing to sleep in her own room because she didn't want me alone. It was on one of those nights that she came running down the hall, breathless. "Grandma," she whispered urgently, "I heard him on the phone. Dad, he told someone he'd have the keys to the mansion by tomorrow." My chest tightened. Tomorrow. He wasn't waiting for me to sign willingly anymore. He was preparing to take by force what wasn't his. I pulled her close, smoothing her hair as though she were still a little girl. "You did well to listen, Emily. We'll be ready." But inside my heart pounded with terror. What did he mean by tomorrow? Would he try to break in? Would he bring men with him? The thought of my own son storming through these doors with strangers turned my stomach. The next morning, I caught Miranda in the garden when she thought I wasn't watching. She stood among the roses, phone pressed to her ear, her voice low but sharp. I lingered behind the curtains, straining to hear. "Yes," she said. "She's stubborn, but Victor has it under control. If we can't get her to sign, we'll move her into a home, the kind where she won't have a choice. Then we'll manage everything ourselves." A home. My breath caught. They wanted to bury me alive in a place where my voice would never be heard again. She turned suddenly, and I stepped back from the window just in time. My reflection stared at me in the glass, pale and shaken. My own son and his wife were plotting not just to steal my house, but to erase me. That night I sat at my desk with the Bible open in front of me. The note still rested between its pages, its words now etched into my soul. If she refuses to sign over the $5 million mansion, throw her out. My hands trembled as I touched it. They had written their plan clearly enough. And now, with Miranda's phone call echoing in my ears, I knew the note was no empty threat. Emily slipped into the room, her face pale. "Grandma, what if they really send you away? What if—" I placed my finger against her lips. "They won't. Do you hear me, Emily? They won't, because we're not going to let them." She nodded, though fear lingered in her eyes. That night, I lay awake listening to the house settle, every creak making my body tense. I thought of Victor as a boy, clutching his toy cars, begging me to read him stories. How had that boy grown into this man who saw me as a hurdle instead of a mother? Where had I gone wrong? But regret would not protect me now. Only preparation would. The following day I called Harold. His voice, steady and reassuring, calmed me. "Clara, hold on to every piece of evidence you have. If Victor tries something rash, you'll be ready. And remember, you're not alone in this." After hanging up, I sat in silence, watching the shadows crawl across the walls. My husband's portrait seemed to gaze down on me with quiet strength. I whispered to him, "I won't let him win.
I won't let our home be stolen." Later that evening, Emily and I walked the grounds together. The garden that once brought me joy now felt like a battlefield. The roses seemed fragile, their petals too delicate to withstand the storm that was coming. Emily clung to my arm, her voice small. "Grandma, do you think Dad will stop if you keep refusing?" I shook my head, unable to lie to her. "No, my dear. He won't stop until he's forced to." Her grip on me tightened. "Then we have to be ready. We have to fight back." Her words pierced me. 17 years old, and already she was being forced into a war against her own parents. It wasn't fair. But life had never been fair to women like us, and if she was willing to stand with me, I had no right to falter. As night fell, I locked the doors and sat by the window, the Bible still resting on the desk beside me. The note inside it had once shattered my world. Now it fueled me. Every time I read those cruel words, I felt my fear harden into resolve. Victor thought tomorrow would bring his triumph, but tomorrow I would be waiting. And when he came for me, he would learn just how wrong he was to believe his mother would go quietly. The night was restless, the kind where shadows seemed to whisper, and every sound felt like a warning. I woke before dawn, my chest heavy, my hands clenched around the blanket. The mansion was still, but I knew the quiet wouldn't last. Victor's words, Miranda's whispers, Emily's frightened eyes, they circled me like ghosts. I needed someone who had walked this road before, someone who could remind me that I wasn't fighting shadows alone. That morning, I called Evelyn again. My voice wavered as I explained what Emily overheard, what I had seen Miranda plotting in the garden. Evelyn's reply was calm but firm, the voice of a woman who had carried her own scars. "Clara, don't wait until they slam the door shut. Meet me today. Bring Emily if you must. We'll talk it through." So we did. Emily and I drove to Evelyn's home, and when she opened the door, the sight of her steady smile nearly undid me. She drew us both inside, the smell of cinnamon and strong coffee wrapping around us like comfort. We sat at her kitchen table, the same one where decades ago we had laughed about our children's antics and whispered about the things women weren't supposed to say out loud. Evelyn poured coffee into chipped mugs, then folded her hands and looked at me directly. "Tell me everything. Don't hold back." I did. I told her about the forged deed, about Victor slamming the papers on my table, about Miranda hinting at sending me to a nursing home. I told her about Emily hiding in hallways, straining to catch their words. With each detail, Evelyn's jaw tightened, her eyes flashing. When I finally fell silent, she leaned back, her voice hard as steel. "They've already decided you're powerless. That's their mistake. What you need now is proof, not just your word, evidence that no one can deny." Emily sat up straighter, nodding eagerly. "I've been recording things, on my phone. I have some of their conversations." Evelyn reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Good girl, don't stop. Every word matters." I felt my throat tighten. "Evelyn, I can't believe this is my life. My own son, plotting against me. I thought the hardest years were behind me after I buried my husband, but this feels worse. It's a betrayal that doesn't end." She looked at me with something like sorrow in her eyes. "Clara, I once thought my son would never forgive me for refusing to sell the farm. Do you remember? He threatened to walk away from me forever, and he did. I haven't spoken to him in years. Betrayal by blood is a wound that never fully closes. But you survive it. You build something stronger out of the pieces." Her words struck me like a bell. She had lived it, endured it, and she was still standing. Could I do the same? Evelyn leaned forward. "When the time comes, I'll stand with you. If you need a witness, if the police need someone to testify, I'll be there. I won't let them write your story for you." Emily looked at me then, her eyes shining. "See, Grandma? You're not alone." I reached for both their hands, one wrinkled with age, the other soft with youth. In that moment, across 3 generations of women, I felt something unshakable. Strength not born of wealth or power, but of loyalty.
When we left Evelyn's house that afternoon, the sky hung heavy with clouds, but I felt lighter. Emily squeezed my arm as we walked to the car. "She's right, Grandma. We're going to stop them." Back home, the mansion no longer felt as suffocating. The walls still held secrets, but I wasn't trapped inside them anymore. I had allies. I had voices ready to stand beside mine. That evening, as I sat by the fire, Evelyn's words replayed in my mind. "They've already decided you're powerless. That's their mistake." I traced the rim of my teacup with a trembling finger and realized she was right. Victor and Miranda saw only an old woman too fragile to fight. They didn't see the network forming around me. They didn't see Harold with his sharp legal mind, Emily with her recordings, Evelyn with her willingness to testify. The thought steadied me. For the first time, I saw the outlines of a plan taking shape. But the mansion still carried an air of menace. When night fell, the silence pressed too close. I sat at my desk, opened the Bible again, and touched the note. Its words had once broken me, but now they burned like fuel. "If she refuses to sign, throw her out." I whispered into the quiet. "I refuse. And I'm not alone anymore." In the distance, thunder rumbled. I knew the storm was still coming. Victor wouldn't let go of $5 million easily. He would fight harder, strike more cruelly. But he was blind to one thing: the strength of women who have nothing left to lose. And as I looked at Emily curled up asleep in the armchair beside me and thought of Evelyn waiting across town, I felt a new certainty settle in my bones. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing for war. The night after visiting Evelyn, I sat alone in the parlor, the fire burning low, my body heavy with exhaustion. The mansion felt cavernous, every creak of the wood echoing like a warning. I had gathered allies, yes, but the truth lingered in my chest like a stone. I was still a 78-year-old widow staring down her own son, and no matter how strong I tried to be, the fear would not leave me. I poured myself a cup of tea, but my hands trembled so badly that the saucer rattled. I thought of my husband, gone all these years, and the night he died. I remembered sitting on the floor of this very house, clutching his old coat, telling myself I would keep the home alive for him, for Victor. That vow had carried me through the darkest hours of grief, yet now it felt like a chain binding me to endless suffering. I whispered to the silence, "Did I make a mistake, John? Did I give too much to Victor? Did I raise him to believe he could take without consequence?" The fire popped, but no answer came, only the hollow echo of my own guilt. Emily appeared in the doorway, her face soft with concern. She crossed the room and knelt beside my chair. "Grandma, you haven't eaten. Please, you need your strength." I stroked her hair the way I used to when she was small. "I'm just tired, darling, tired in my bones. Sometimes I wonder if fighting him is even worth it. He's my son. Part of me still hopes he'll remember he's my child before it's too late." Her eyes brimmed with tears, but her voice was steady. "Grandma, if you give up, he'll win. And if he wins, you'll lose everything. Your house, your dignity, your life as you know it. He's not acting like your son anymore. He's acting like a stranger who only sees money." Her words pierced me. I wanted to believe there was still a trace of the boy I raised, but every memory of his recent cruelty smothered that hope. Miranda urging me into a nursing home, Victor slamming his hand on the desk, the forged signature that mocked me from the page. My chest tightened with despair. I felt the years pressing down, the loneliness of widowhood stretching like an endless corridor. "Emily," I whispered, "what if I'm not strong enough? What if I fail you?" She grabbed my hand, holding it fiercely. "Then I'll fight for you. But I know you, Grandma. You don't fail. You never have. You taught me that women can survive anything. Don't stop believing that now." Her conviction both broke and mended me. I leaned back, closing my eyes, letting her words settle. She was right.
I had endured more than most, and I was still standing. But the weight of betrayal cut deep. The pain of knowing my son, the boy I once rocked to sleep, the boy I sacrificed everything for, was willing to destroy me, left me feeling hollow. Hours passed in silence. Emily dozed in the chair beside me, but I remained awake, staring at the shadows shifting across the ceiling. My mind wandered back to 1969, when I first opened my shop. Men scoffed at me then, said no woman could run a business alone. I had sewn dresses until my fingers bled, saved every dollar, fought for every customer, and I had proven them wrong. That fire, the one that built a life from nothing, still lived inside me. Tears slid down my cheeks. "I can't let him erase me," I whispered into the dark. "Not after everything." I rose from my chair and crossed the room to my desk. The Bible lay there, the note still tucked inside. I pulled it out, reading the words again. "If she refuses to sign over the $5 million mansion, throw her out." My hands shook, but this time not from fear, from anger. Pure, sharp anger. I placed the note back into the Bible and pressed my palm against it. "This will not be my ending," I vowed aloud. Behind me, Emily stirred. She opened her eyes and smiled faintly. "Grandma, you're still awake?" "Yes," I said softly, brushing her hair back from her face. "And I've made a decision. No matter how dark this gets, I will not surrender this house, not to Victor, not to Miranda, not to anyone." She reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. "Then we'll win. I know we will." As the fire dimmed to embers, I felt the weight in my chest lift just slightly. The night had nearly broken me, but in the quiet of that moment, I found my resolve again. The shadows would not claim me, not yet. I leaned back, letting the warmth of the embers wash over me, and whispered to myself, "Clara Whitmore does not go quietly." The next evening, the mansion's stillness was shattered. I had just set down my teacup when the front door swung open with a crash. Victor stormed in, his face twisted with fury, Miranda close behind him. 2 large men followed, strangers with cold eyes, the kind of men paid to do things no son should ever consider. My heart slammed against my ribs. Emily, who had been in the kitchen, froze in the doorway. I motioned for her to stay back, but her wide eyes never left mine. Victor strode straight to the dining table, a folder in hand. He slammed it down so hard the china rattled. "Sign the papers, Mother, right now. Enough delays, enough games. Sign, or I swear you'll regret it." The room seemed to shrink around me. My breath came shallow, my fingers icy against the fabric of my dress. I forced myself to meet his eyes, though everything inside me trembled. "Victor," I said quietly, "do you even hear yourself? Bringing strangers into my home? Threatening your own mother?" "Stop with the dramatics," he snapped, his voice cutting. "This isn't about family. It's about survival. I need that deed, and I need it now." Miranda's voice slithered in behind his. "We're giving you a chance to do this the easy way. Sign, and you'll be taken care of. Refuse, and—" She let the words trail, her smirk finishing the threat. The 2 men shifted, their presence filling the room with menace. I gripped the edge of the table to keep myself steady. Every instinct screamed at me to collapse, to weep, to give in. But Emily's voice from the night before rang in my ears. "You never fail. Don't stop believing that now." I let my shoulders sag, feigning defeat. "All right," I whispered, my voice cracking. "If it's the only way." Victor thrust the pen into my hand, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "Finally. Now, sign." My hand trembled as I lowered the pen, the paper swimming before my eyes. But at the very last second, I froze. My fingers slackened, and the pen clattered onto the table. I looked up, meeting his gaze with a steadiness he hadn't expected. "No, Victor. Not today. Not ever." His face darkened, rage flooding his features. He leaned closer, his voice a growl. "Don't test me. You're old, fragile. No one will believe you over me. If you won't sign willingly, I'll find another way." Behind him, Miranda folded her arms, her smile sharp as a knife. "He's right. You're alone in this, Clara.
No one will come to your rescue." But she was wrong. Emily's phone was hidden in her pocket, recording every word. She had slipped it out the moment Victor began shouting, her thumb pressing record with trembling determination. I kept my eyes on my son, my voice low but unwavering. "You've already forged my name once. Do you think the world won't notice when you try again? Do you think your daughter won't testify against you?" For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in his eyes. Just a flicker, but it was enough. Emily stepped forward then, her voice shaking, but brave. "Dad, stop. This isn't you. You're hurting Grandma, and I won't let you." Victor spun on her, his expression fierce. "Emily, stay out of this." But she didn't back down. She held her phone close to her chest, her chin lifted. "No, I've heard everything. I've seen what you've done, and if you try to take this house, the world will know." Miranda's face paled, realizing what Emily meant. She lunged toward her, but I moved first, placing myself between them. My frail body, bent with age, stood as the only barrier between my granddaughter and the woman who wanted to erase me. My voice rang through the room. "Enough! You will not touch her. You will not take this house. This ends here." The strangers exchanged uneasy glances. Perhaps they had expected an easy job, an old woman too weak to resist. But the sight of me standing tall, of Emily recording everything, made them hesitate. One of them muttered something under his breath and shifted toward the door. Victor saw his advantage slipping, and his fury boiled over. He slammed both fists onto the table, rattling the chandelier above us. "You'll regret this, Mother. You've just declared war." I steadied my breathing, letting the silence stretch after his words. Then I whispered, steady as stone, "No, Victor. You declared war the moment you chose greed over blood." Emily reached for my hand, her grip warm and strong. I could feel her pulse racing as fast as mine, but together we stood unbroken. At last, Victor gathered the papers with shaking hands and stormed out, Miranda trailing after him, her heels striking the floor like gunshots. The two men followed, muttering, and the slam of the front door left the mansion shuddering. The house was quiet again, but not peaceful. The air was charged, thick with the echo of threats and promises of more to come. Emily sank into a chair, tears spilling down her cheeks. I gathered her into my arms, rocking her gently. "You were brave," I whispered into her hair. "Braver than I ever imagined. You saved us tonight." She pulled back, her eyes fierce despite the tears. "No, Grandma, we saved each other." I looked around the room, the scattered papers, the dent where Victor's fists had struck the wood, the pen lying abandoned on the floor. It was a battlefield now, and I knew the war wasn't finished. But the recording Emily held in her phone, the evidence etched into its memory, was the weapon we needed, and soon it would be time to use it. The mansion was eerily quiet after Victor's rage-filled departure, but I could still feel the tremors of his threats in the air. The dent in the dining table where his fists had slammed remained like a scar, a reminder that the boy I raised was long gone. Emily sat beside me, clutching her phone, her knuckles white, her lips pressed tight. That recording was more than a lifeline. It was our shield, our weapon, our proof. The next morning, I rose early. The sky outside was gray, heavy with clouds that promised rain. I dressed carefully, choosing a dark blue dress my husband once said made me look strong. I stood in front of the mirror for a long moment, studying the woman staring back. Wrinkled, yes. Worn, yes. But also unbroken. Emily joined me in the study, her face pale, but her eyes bright with resolve. "Grandma," she whispered, "what are we going to do now?" I placed a hand on her shoulder. "We fight, darling. Not with fists, not with anger, but with truth." That afternoon, Victor returned. He didn't bring strangers this time, only Miranda, but his arrogance filled the room enough to make it hard to breathe. He set his case on the desk, his eyes burning with determination. "This is your last chance," he said, his voice calm but sharp. "Sign the deed, or I'll make sure you're declared unfit to manage your own affairs. One way or another, this house will be mine."
I looked at him, my heart heavy but steady. You speak as if this is business, Victor, but it isn't. It's betrayal, and betrayals have consequences. He sneered. Consequences? What consequences can you bring? You're alone, Mother. Old, tired, forgotten. I straightened in my chair, letting the strength I had hidden rise to the surface. My voice cut through the room. No, Victor, I am not forgotten, and I am not alone. With that, I reached into the desk drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. I placed it on the table, sliding it toward him. He frowned, snatched it up, and tore it open. Inside was a copy of my new will, drafted with Harold's guidance. His eyes widened as he read the words aloud. The mansion transferred directly to Emily? His voice cracked. You gave it to her? Yes, I said firmly, because she has shown me loyalty, compassion, and love. Qualities you've long abandoned. This house, this legacy, will go to the one person who still remembers what family means. Miranda's hand flew to her mouth, her face blanching. Victor's expression twisted with shock and rage. You dare cut me out? He spat. Your only son? I met his fury with calm. You cut yourself out, Victor, the day you chose greed over blood. Emily stepped forward then, her voice trembling but strong. Dad, Grandma's right. You don't deserve this house, and if you keep pushing, everyone will know what you've done. I have proof. Victor turned to her, his face darkening. Proof? She lifted her phone, holding it firmly. Recordings. Everything you said last night. The threats. The men you brought here. It's all saved. For a moment, silence filled the room. Victor's hands shook as he reached for the papers on the table, his fury boiling over. But Miranda grabbed his arm, her voice sharp. Victor, stop! Don't you see? She set you up. If you keep pushing, you'll lose everything. I rose slowly, my body frail, but my stance unyielding. I didn't set you up, Victor. You set yourself up the moment you treated me as an obstacle instead of your mother. And now, it's too late to undo what you've done. He glared at me, his chest heaving, his face red with rage. This isn't over, he hissed, not by a long shot. But I could see it in his eyes, the fear, the realization that his empire of lies was crumbling. He backed away, clutching the torn will, Miranda pulling at his sleeve. They stormed out, the slam of the door rattling the windows. Emily rushed to my side, tears streaming down her cheeks. Grandma, you did it. You showed him you're not afraid. I wrapped my arms around her, pressing my lips to her hair. My heart still raced, but beneath it lay a steady calm. We're not finished yet, darling, but the tide has turned. He knows now. He knows I won't be broken. That night, I sat at my desk again, the Bible open before me. The note still lay inside, its cruel words etched into my memory. But instead of fear, I felt a fire in my chest. I traced the edge of the paper and whispered, You thought this would destroy me, Victor, but it only gave me strength. Outside, thunder rolled across the Charleston sky. The storm was close now, but I was ready. The battle had shifted. The next time Victor came, he would not find a frightened old woman. He would find a mother armed with truth, allies, and the courage he thought she no longer possessed. The storm finally broke on a humid Charleston night, rain pounding the windows as though the sky itself raged with me. I sat in the study, the Bible resting open on my desk, the note tucked inside when the sound of tires screeched outside the gates. My heart tightened. This was it. The end game. The front door burst open, and Victor charged in, drenched from the storm but burning with fury. Miranda trailed close behind, her face pale, her eyes darting like a cornered animal. This time, though, they weren't alone. 2 police officers stepped through the doorway, followed by Harold with his worn briefcase. And just behind him, Evelyn entered, her umbrella dripping rainwater, her expression sharp and unyielding. Victor froze at the sight of them. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice rising above the storm. Harold stepped forward, calm but firm. "This, Victor,
is the consequence of your choices. We've gathered enough evidence to bring the truth into the light." Emily appeared at my side, her phone clutched in her hand. She looked small beside the towering officers, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Dad, I recorded everything, every threat, every word. They all know." Victor's face drained of color, then flushed red with anger. "You traitor!" he spat at her. "You would betray your own father for her?" Emily's voice cracked, but she didn't waver. "No, Dad. You betrayed yourself. You betrayed us all." The officers moved forward, one holding out a warrant. "Victor Whitmore, you are under arrest for fraud, forgery, and attempted coercion." He recoiled, his eyes wild. "This is insane. She's senile, confused. She doesn't know what she's saying." He pointed at me, desperation sharpening his tone. "I'm her son. This house was always meant to be mine." I rose slowly from my chair, my legs trembling, but my voice firm. "No, Victor. This house was meant to honor your father's memory, to protect our family. But you chose greed. You tried to steal it, not inherit it. And that is why you've lost it." Miranda tried to interject, her words tumbling over each other. Wait, I didn't do anything. I was just helping. I didn't know what Victor planned." Evelyn's laugh cut sharp through the room. "You knew plenty. You whispered about nursing homes. You smirked when he threatened her. Don't pretend you're innocent now." The officers exchanged glances. One of them turned to Miranda. "You'll need to come with us, too. You're complicit in this scheme." Miranda's face twisted, and she turned on Victor with a hiss. "This is your fault. You told me she'd break easily. You said she'd give up." Victor shoved her away, his mask completely gone. "You were supposed to keep her quiet. You couldn't even manage that." The storm outside howled, rain hammering against the glass as the officers moved in. One grabbed Victor's arm, but he yanked free, his voice raw with desperation. "Mother, think of everything I've done. Think of the family name. You can't let them do this to me." I stepped closer, my hands trembling but my voice carrying the weight of decades. "You did this to yourself, Victor. You wrote your betrayal into the pages of that Bible. You turned your back on me, on Emily, on everything this family stood for. The family name means nothing when it's drenched in lies." For a moment he looked at me, just looked. And in his eyes, I glimpsed the boy he once was, the boy who used to cling to my hand at church, who begged me for one more story before bed. But that boy was gone, buried beneath layers of greed and pride. The officers restrained him, reading his rights as Miranda sobbed against the wall. Evelyn stepped closer to me, her hand firm on my shoulder. "It's over, Clara. You did it." But I wasn't sure it was over until Emily stepped forward, holding up her phone. She played the recording aloud, Victor's voice filling the room. "If she refuses to sign, throw her out. The house will be mine by tomorrow." The words hung heavy in the air, undeniable, damning. Victor's shoulders sagged as if the fight had drained from him. The officers led him toward the door, Miranda following, her face streaked with tears. As they reached the threshold, Victor turned back one last time. His voice cracked, not with fury now, but with something that almost sounded like despair. "You've lost me, Mother. You'll never see me again." I met his eyes, my own tears finally spilling over. "I lost you long ago, Victor. The moment you chose money over love." The door closed behind them, the echo reverberating through the mansion. The storm outside began to ease, the thunder rolling away into the distance. For the first time in weeks, the house felt still, not with dread, but with relief. Emily collapsed against me, sobbing into my shoulder. I stroked her hair, whispering softly, "It's over now, darling. You're safe. We're safe." Harold packed up his briefcase with quiet efficiency, his eyes kind as he looked at me. "You were brave, Clara. Braver than most. You stood your ground when others would have fallen." Evelyn smiled, her eyes glistening. "And you reminded us all what it means to fight for what's right. You gave every betrayed mother a voice tonight." I sank into my chair, exhausted.
the Bible still open on the desk beside me. The note lay there, its edges crumpled from my trembling fingers. Once it had nearly destroyed me. Now it was nothing more than evidence of a battle I had survived. I lifted it gently, sliding it into a small wooden frame I kept for photographs. Placing it on the mantel, I whispered, "From these words, I found my strength." The storm outside had broken, but inside me, a new dawn was beginning, and for the first time in a long while, I felt free. The mansion was quiet again, but not with the silence of fear. This time, it was the hush that comes after thunder, when the air is still heavy, but the storm has already passed. I sat in the parlor, my hands resting in my lap, staring at the dent in the dining table where Victor had pounded his fists. The memory of his voice still echoed in the walls, but now it felt distant, fading. Emily sat curled beside me on the sofa, her head against my shoulder. She hadn't let go of me since the officers led her parents out. Her phone, still clutched in her hand, held the recording that had sealed their downfall. She had carried the weight of their betrayal too, but now, for the first time, I could see relief softening her features. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice small, "is it really over?" I stroked her hair gently. "Yes, darling, it's over. They can't hurt us anymore." But even as I said the words, a heaviness tugged at me. It was over in one sense, the immediate danger, the threats, the forged deeds. Yet the deeper wound, the knowledge that my only son had chosen greed over love, would not heal so quickly. Later that evening, Evelyn came by. She carried a basket of fresh bread from her kitchen, but her eyes searched mine as soon as she stepped through the door. She saw what Emily hadn't, the exhaustion etched into my face, the grief beneath my calm. She sat with me at the dining table, placing her hand over mine. "Clara, you won. You saved your home. But I know victories like this don't feel simple. You've lost something too." I nodded, unable to hold back the tears this time. They slipped down my cheeks, hot and unrelenting. "I lost my son, Evelyn. He's still alive, but I've lost him all the same. How do you grieve for a child who turns his back on you?" She squeezed my hand. "You grieve, but you don't let it consume you. You remember that you gave him love, you gave him chances, and his choices were his own. You didn't fail, Clara. He did." Her words sank deep, painful, but necessary. Emily joined us at the table, her young face serious, her hands folded as though she were listening to some sermon. "Grandma," she said softly, "I'm sorry about Dad, but I'm glad you didn't give up. If you had, I would have lost you too." I pulled her into my arms, holding her tight. "You'll never lose me, Emily. Not while I still have breath." The hours passed slowly, the three of us talking, sometimes in words, sometimes in silence. The house felt different now, lighter, though scarred. The photographs on the walls seemed to stare back at me with new meaning. My husband's portrait above the mantel no longer reminded me of what I'd lost, but of the strength he had always believed I carried. Later, when the night had deepened, Evelyn rose to leave. She kissed my cheek, her voice firm. "Rest now, Clara. You've carried enough for one lifetime. Let Emily carry some of it with you." After she left, Emily and I sat together by the fire until she drifted to sleep, her head in my lap. I watched the flames flicker and thought of the boy Victor once was. The boy who begged me to mend his baseball glove, who cried when he scraped his knee, who promised me he'd always protect me when he grew up. That boy was gone, replaced by a man who nearly destroyed me. And yet, despite the anger, despite the betrayal, a part of me still mourned him. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the windows, warm and golden. The storm had passed entirely, leaving the garden washed clean. I walked outside, my bare feet sinking into the damp grass. The roses glistened with droplets of rain, their petals heavy but unbroken. I touched one gently, feeling its resilience. Emily joined me, her hair tousled from sleep. She slipped her arm through mine and smiled faintly. "It feels different today, doesn't it?" "Yes," I said, breathing in the fresh air. "The house feels alive again, free." We stood together in the garden, the mansion rising behind us. It no longer felt like a battlefield.
It was home again, and though the scars of betrayal would remain, so too would the strength of what we had survived. As we turned back toward the house, I whispered to myself, he tried to take everything, but he couldn't take me, and he couldn't take her. Emily looked up at me then, her eyes shining. We won, Grandma. I nodded, squeezing her hand. Yes, darling, we did. And for the first time in a long while, I let myself believe it. Years passed, and the mansion slowly transformed from a house filled with shadows to a place filled with voices, laughter, and light. Emily grew into a young woman with the same determination I once carried, but with a gentleness that made people trust her instantly. She decided to turn the estate into more than a private home. Grandma, she told me one morning, her eyes alight with purpose, this place shouldn't just hold our memories. It should hold the community, too. And so she did. The grand rooms where Victor once tried to corner me became spaces for neighbors to gather. The old library became a study hall for children. The ballroom, long unused, turned into a center for women to learn new skills, to find support, to build lives of their own. Emily poured her heart into it, and I watched with pride as the mansion became a beacon, not a battlefield. I spent my days quietly, tending to the roses in the garden, reading in the sunlight, sipping tea in the mornings while I listened to the hum of voices inside. No longer did the walls echo with threats or deceit. They echoed with life, with hope, with the kind of legacy I wanted to leave behind. Sometimes when I sat in the parlor, I thought of Victor. The wound of his betrayal would never vanish entirely. I never saw him again after the night the police took him away. News trickled in through Harold. Court hearings, prison sentences, Miranda disappearing into the shadows of her own shame. Each time I heard, my chest ached. He was my son, my flesh and blood, and some part of me would always grieve the boy he used to be. But I also knew this. He had made his choices, and I had made mine. One evening, Emily found me sitting by the fire, the Bible resting on my lap. She sat beside me, glancing at the small wooden frame on the mantel. Inside it, preserved behind glass, was the note that had once nearly destroyed me. Its words were still clear. If she refuses to sign over the $5 million mansion, throw her out. Emily touched the frame gently. Why do you keep it there, Grandma? Doesn't it hurt to see it every day? I smiled faintly, brushing my fingers across the glass. Because it reminds me, darling. It reminds me that even in the face of betrayal, I found the strength to stand. It reminds me that from those cruel words, I wrote a different ending. She nodded, her eyes soft. It's like a warning, but also a victory. Exactly, I said. It reminds me that pain can be turned into power, that betrayal doesn't define us. It shapes us, if we let it. We sat together in silence for a while, the fire crackling softly. I thought of all the women who came through the doors of the mansion now, carrying their own burdens, their own betrayals. I saw myself reflected in them, and I felt proud that this place, once nearly stolen, now gave them sanctuary. The years weighed on me, yes, but I felt lighter than I had in decades. My body moved slower, my hands shook more often, but my heart was steady. I had survived the worst storm, and I had come out not broken, but whole. On the morning of my 82nd birthday, Evelyn visited, carrying flowers from her garden. She hugged me tightly, her laughter still strong. You did it, Clara, she said. You turned pain into purpose. Not everyone can say that. I smiled at her, my heart warm. I didn't do it alone. I had you, I had Harold, and most of all, I had Emily. Later, as the sun dipped low over the Charleston horizon, I walked slowly through the mansion one last time that day. The children's laughter echoed in the library, women's voices rose in encouragement from the ballroom. Emily's steady footsteps moved through the halls as she guided volunteers. I touched the walls gently, whispering a silent thank you to my husband, to the years of struggle, to the strength that had carried me through. Back in the study, I sat at my desk and opened my journal. My hands trembled as I wrote, but the words came clearly. Even when betrayal comes from the ones we love most, we are not powerless. We can stand, we can fight, and we can win. I closed the journal and looked once more at the framed note on the mantel. It no longer held the power to frighten me. Now it was only a reminder of how far I had come. "I still keep it here," I whispered aloud, not to grieve, but to honor the strength it awakened in me. From that note, I wrote my own ending. Emily appeared in the doorway then, smiling as she held out a cup of tea. "Happy birthday, Grandma. Here's to many more years in the house you never let go." I took the cup, my eyes glistening. Here's to the house, here's to the fight, and here's to us. And as the fire glowed warmly, I knew my story was complete, not with defeat, but with dignity. The mansion stood, I stood, and through Emily, the legacy would carry on.